Hi, folks. I hope you're enjoying this season. For me, it's like most of the other ones. Completely chaotic, but somehow coming together quite well, with some fascinating interviews that I've had, which have led me down a few rabbit holes. This is a short mid-season interruption to promote some of the stuff I've got going on in the background. The main one is that I've launched a new range of merchandise, which was just released last week. So if you're looking for a Christmas present for someone who's a fan of the podcast, now's your chance. Merchandise for a podcast about the Troubles does seem a little bit odd, and I pushed against it for a good while. But in the 5 years since this podcast has been running, I've had a lot of requests from listeners for a way to buy merchandise. My buddy Chris made the podcast font logo, and that's kind of all I had for a long time. And I hadn't really put much thought into the branding of the podcast. You're so focused on making the episodes, you don't realise there's actually a lot of PR that you have to do on the other side. But earlier this year, I was approached by Seamus, who's one of the guys behind the company Visual Antics Apparel, who are a Northern Irish clothing company. We launched tees, jumpers and hoodies with the original The Troubles podcast on them, which is lovely, but I do wonder if it's a bit on the nose to be walking around Belfast with The Troubles on your chest. Most of the people who bought those jumpers were from outside of the country. I also don't really want to sell balaclavas and stuff like that, because that's not reflective of what this podcast is striving to be. The tone always has to be somewhat delicate. Though strangely enough, someone reached out and said they would buy a tea towel, but they wouldn't buy t-shirts with the podcast logo on it. So this week we've launched a couple of other varieties of tees, jumpers and hats. One which I really like is a homage to the Free Dairy Corner, which states, "You are now listening to the Troubles podcast." And the other, which is a bit more podcast focused, saying "recording in progress." This clothing line is described as high-end streetwear, and I find myself wearing the acid green hoodie a lot, and I really love the quality of the t-shirts. But what I love most is that this is supporting Northern Irish people with an amazing business practice. The clothing comes with a lot of certificates. They're fair trade, and they come from a climate-neutral production line. They're also PETA vegan approved, which sounds a bit mad, and they also hit all of the fair wear standards. So if any of this sounds like something you'd like, you can check out the range at visualanticsapparel.com/collections/the-troubles-podcast. Or you can just Google Visual Antic Apparel, The Troubles Podcast, and that should get you there. I'll leave a link in the show notes, but sometimes hot links disappear once I publish. I'll also be making a video with some of the new stuff offered next week on Patreon. So some other bits while we're here. I haven't been advertising the Patreon as much on the pod, but it's still there and I am continuously uploading videos every other week. There's also a couple of Patreon exclusive episodes and even interviews. So if you'd like to support, come on over and say hi, but do make sure you sign up for a paid tier and not the free one, as there isn't much on the free tier. For Patreon listeners, I'll also be offering a 10% discount code for anyone who purchases merch. And finally, my touring season has finished. I work pretty much full-time with American clients as a private driver guide around Ireland. So that means I pick you up and I bring you around the country for a few days. But sometimes I do day trips from Dublin too. And this year I actually brought a few listeners of the podcast around and had some of my favourite days out touring. It's a fun job, but it's tough to manage when trying to write the podcast. Just last week I was walking around the town of Ennis till about midnight trying to proof the Reevy Brothers episode. This is the year I finally decided to launch a website for my company, which is called The Grand Irish Experience. So if you want to learn more about what I do or inquire about coming over on a trip, you can do so at thegrandirish.experience.com. So enough of that, time to get working on the next episode. See you next week.